Hey there guys and girls, Manthys here and welcome back to another video. So today let's talk about the Missives for a few minutes. You may have spotted these selling like hotcakes at the moment, and there's a very good reason for that. Main reason being is it's Legendary Week. Yes it is. Everybody is out there, they're getting their Soul Ash, they've been running through Torghast, and it's about time to craft that Legendary. But you can't just craft a Legendary, you need a few items. The rune carver will even give you a shopping list. On that shopping list he's going to tell you to buy a base Legendary item, and thankfully for us even points us in the direction of the auction house. But you also require 2 Missives. These Missives are created by scribes and are very similar in price to a Dark Moon card, but you should be crafting a whole bunch of these, and I wanted to give you a few little bits of advice today on A, how to go about crafting them, B, how you should be pricing them, and C, well, how many of them you can expect to sell. Now, let's do some quick numbers here. Let's think about this logically. If every single person wants to craft a rank 1 legendary this week, and every single person needs 2 missives, how many sales do you think of missives you could potentially make this week? Yeah, a lot. Definitely a lot. But let's take a look at what they are and let's see how they differ. And there's some interesting things with this that we'll point out, and it's basically the ink usage. Every single one of the missives requires a single tranquil ink. That's pretty straightforward. We probably know by now that the tranquil ink comes from Nightshade. You're going to need to be milling a whole bunch of Nightshade to get these reliably. That's not to say you can't make tranquil inks from milling the other herbs. It's just super rare. I've got some milling numbers for you in a minute, so we'll get to those. But what is really quite interesting is just how many inks that the missives use. Look at the versatility one, for example. It is very top heavy on umbral ink, whereas it's actually pretty light on the luminous ink. Where you go to the other end of the scale, you've got the missive of critical strike, and that is super heavy on luminous ink and pretty light on umbral ink. What this is actually going to mean is that we are likely going to have 4 different prices for these missives. It's not just as simple as craft a bunch of herbs and throw them all on the auction house for a similar price. You are going to have to price these accordingly to the amount of inks. Now let's talk about the inks very quickly. We spoke about tranquil ink. We know tranquil ink comes from Nightshade primarily. It's the rare ink, it's expensive. Just some quick numbers for you. For a single tranquil ink, on average you need to mill 3 Nightshade. So if you buy 300 Nightshade and mill them all, you're likely to get 100 tranquil ink. The maths on that one is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You may get a few extra tranquil pigments occasionally if you're milling Death Blossom or Vigil's Torch or something, but it's so little amount that it's hard to really sort of slip it into the numbers. But luminous ink, let's talk about luminous ink. Luminous ink is usually on most servers, now I'm very aware that most servers' prices are all over the place right now, but luminous ink is usually considerably cheaper than umbral ink. And this is for one simple reason. It's the milling rates. Yes, it's the milling rates. So let's take a quick look at the milling rates then, and it'll all start to make sense. If you go in and you mill 1,000 of a single herb, I've put this little calculator together. It's available in the cheat sheet. You know where it is now. It's in the description. This is quite simply where the extra luminous ink has come from. Up until this point, Dark Moon cards have been the main reason why scribes have been milling. Yeah, Dark Moon cards have been a big seller. We know that. They're still a big seller to this day on a lot of realms. But the side effect of that is that people have been choosing to mill not just Death Blossom, they've been choosing to mill virtually any herbs they can get their hands on, whereas a lot of them have not realised that if you start milling Marrow Root or Rising Glory or Vigil's Torch or even Widow Bloom if you're crazy, the amount of inks or pigments that you get from those herbs is actually very different. If we look at the 2 somewhat most popular herbs outside of Death Blossom, of course, Rising Glory and Vigil's Torch. Both of these are usually pretty cheap on the auction house, certainly compared to Marrow Root and Widow Bloom. Why is that? Well, getting hold of Marrow Root, you have to go into Moldraxxus. Nobody particularly likes herbing in Moldraxxus. Not entirely sure why, but they just don't. Widow Bloom is also very rare. There's just not that many nodes of it in Revendreth, and so it's basically meant that Rising Glory and Vigil's Torch have been way more abundant, and the fact that whenever you're farming for those two herbs, you also get a whole load of Death Blossom. And if you look at the numbers when you mill those herbs, they're very, very top heavy on Luminous. So what people have been doing is they've been milling all of these herbs like crazy over the last few days for Dark Moon cards, and they've just ended up with boatloads more Luminous than they actually need. Because a Dark Moon card, for in case you didn't know, only requires 7 of each specific herb. A Dark Moon card has got the inks balanced. This has meant Umbreal inks are expensive, Luminous inks are cheap. This isn't going to always be the case. Just remember that though. What you may want to do is you may want to look at the price of these Luminous inks on your auction house, and if they are significantly cheaper, it may be worthwhile skipping the milling stage completely and just buying some of the Luminous inks, and then looking at focusing on just milling some stuff that does give you top heavy amounts of Umbreal ink. Now that in theory could be Marrowroot or Widowbloom, although Widowbloom especially is going to be very expensive. Marrowroot may be an option for you, but ultimately I would recommend, as long as it's a really good price, get yourself a whole bunch of Death Blossom. Death Blossom is going to be the best one for milling. Mill a whole bunch of Death Blossom, craft yourself a whole bunch of Missives, and if you require any more Luminous, you can switch out what you're milling a little bit to kind of ease the pain slightly. But guys and girls, you really do want to get on board with the Missives. They are flying off the shelves like hotcakes right now, simply because everybody making that legendary wants 2 of them. So I hope that's going to be helpful to you. A little bit of a few hints and tips on what to do with Missives. When it comes to pricing them, just be careful. Make sure you're not selling them too cheap. And I know you'll say on some of your realms that they're selling for way below cost right now. But did you know all of these costs? Well, we'll see. But anyway, guys, I hope that's been helpful. I've been Manthius, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.